Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of over 600 videos on monster ecology, fantasy world history, character classes and magic items on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking the join button below or backing me on Patreon where you can get full access to all the scripts I write for these vids. Members also become members of a secretive Gluminati guild in the Discord server for the channel, and of course subscribing to me here as I upload at least twice a week and have a live stream every weekend. Today I have a very special episode as I've teamed up with Dungeon Dad to bring you an infamous furry space monster, the giant space hamster.
Hey guys, I am extremely happy to be here. This rodent gets a bit of a bad rep for being super goofy, which may or may not be completely deserved, but I've tried my best to think of some ways that you can use this beastie as a worthy adversary or a noble companion for your party, but we'll get into that a little bit more later on. So for now, take it away, AJ.
Thank you. Giant space hamsters are exactly what they sound like. They are quite adorable mammals, which are rodents about the size of a grizzly bear, adults standing just over 3 feet or 1 meter tall at the shoulder, with an overall length of 9 feet or 2.7 meters and a weight of up to 600 pounds or 272 kilograms at least. They have thick fur that tends to be golden brown but with a white underbelly, bands and spots. They are found throughout the prime material plane on planets and habitats visited and colonized by the gnomes who were native to the world of Kryn. Kryn is in another crystal sphere out in the vast Phlogiston Sea, travelled by fabulous spelljamming vessels, but although travel to and from the Forgotten Realms is now very rare, there are rumours of a portal that connects Kryn to Toril, located in the northern region of the Sword in the Anarok Desert, where it opens on Kryn. Your guess is as good as mine. Further evidence pointing to a greater connection between several crystal spheres lies in the presence of the Krynish wizard Dalamar the Black, who is a good friend of Alminster of Toril and Mordenkainen of Earth, and Ed of the Greenwood of Earth. So it is safe to say you never know where or when one of the giant space hamsters is going to show up. The gnomes of Kryn inhabit the sphere called Kryn Space, which is part of the Free Space Alliance of Grey Space, Realm Space and Kryn Space, formed as a mutual protection pact against the expansive Vodoni Empire. In fact, the War of the Spheres took place only midway through the 14th century of Dale Reckoning, so not that long ago really. The gnomes of Kryn are masters of creating complicated ships that rely on artifice to drive them, even more so than magic. And to power the giant rubber bands that spin around gear systems within their ships, they needed more than just teams of gnomes running along the belts. They needed to breed giant space hamsters. Aside from the need to consume 30 pounds or 13.6 kilograms of food every day, which includes plenty of greens but also fruits, nuts, grains and even a little raw or cooked meats, along with the 10 gallons of water per day, the giant hamsters are very clean, requiring a natural or artificial tunnel with fresh wood shavings for a comfortable lair. They are fairly docile creatures when raised to be used by handlers. They have a prodigious breeding rate, very much like their tiny ancestors. They have a lifespan of 18 years, can have up to 3 litters of pups per year in ideal conditions. Because of their size, the gestation of a giant space hamster is 3 months. With a litter of only 1 to 4 pups is born, they have no hair or teeth and their eyes are closed. Over the next 14 days, they are totally dependent on their mother to feed and protect them. They open their eyes and look very much like mini adults by 20 days and continue to nurse from the mother for up to another 2 weeks, but also begin eating soft, solid food as soon as they grow teeth. They take 2 years to grow to full adulthood and are fertile for their entire lives. Females are slightly more common than males, but they are more or less the same size. Like regular tiny hamsters, the giant space hamsters can store food in the loose cheeks in their mouth, up to 200 pounds or 90 kilograms of food, or if they successfully bite a medium or smaller sized creature, they can stuff them into the cheek pouch as well. Those giant space hamsters that have been released or escaped from captivity and become wild will live in small communal groups of 1 to 4 adults, typically with a few babies and juveniles not yet breeding age mixed into the population. Wild giant space hamsters are more aggressive, but still quite pathetic and tend to get predated on pretty heavily, resulting in their population getting wiped out eventually, or they simply overpopulate the area and consume all the food, resulting in mass starvation. Wild giant space hamsters dig their own burrows, leaving a 6-foot wide and 180-foot long twisting and winding tunnel in a hillside with a larger nesting chamber at the end. They are not smart creatures. Their nests are fairly rudimentary, and they operate completely on instinct and habit, with anything out of the ordinary triggering a response to an impulse to run away. They only attack if they are cornered or captured. The males will make a charging bite attack to hopefully scare off a predator if that gets too close to their burrow, but only a female who is guarding her pups will actually stand and fight. Training them out of that behavior is very, very difficult unless they have been modified. Now, here is where giant space hamsters get really weird and quirky. Gnomes do eat giant space hamster. They absolutely love the meat. They call it space ham, which has been contracted down to spayham. Even if they don't need the hamsters to power the manual drive belts in their ships and workshops, they still raise them as livestock. When they are without a breeding population in captivity, gnomes of Krynn have been known to go on hunting expeditions for a fresh supply of delicious spayham. Gnomes will eat large quantities of the stuff with every meal if they can, and is often found in the trade supplies of other spacefaring races, dried or in large tins. Also, fresh giant space hamster hocks are particularly valued. Gnomes and breeding animals, particularly Krynnish gnomes and biological science, along with some good-natured competition amongst farmers and just plain ill-advised curiosity among their scientists and breeders, have resulted in pure mayhem with this artificial species. This is all thanks to an unexpected quality of giant space hamster, which makes it very sensitive to enchanted substances introduced during the reproductive process, particularly substances which are derived from other species. Now, this is hilarious on the surface, but there is a deeper joke here that I think I should explain. In biology, particularly medical research and commercial biological protein production, the cells that are used are called Cho cells. Cho is short for Chinese hamster ovaries. These cells have occasional changes in their genetic makeup which allows them to proliferate indefinitely, making them effectively immortal. These transformed cells are the standardized cell line used all over the world in biological science and industry. So having actual giant mutant hamsters is, well, it's hilarious on a deeper level than just the grizzly bear-sized space rodents. I should point out that this has been it's been a long time since any Chinese hamsters were involved in Cho cell production. In case you were worried there were millions of them getting unspeakable things done to them in secret laboratories somewhere. No. There are completely different unspeakable things being done in other laboratories, but they have nothing to do with giant space hamsters. So, where are these breeds? What are these mutant breeds of giant hamster? Well, aside from the woolly, the mottled, the ochre, the eastern, western, chartreuse, spotted, not so quite so spotted, only a little spotted, plaid, cave-dwelling, three-toed, lesser, greater, and greater lesser, albino and flightless giant space hamster, there are only really the unusual varieties that some adventurers may have the misfortune of encountering. These are the ones often associated with the phrase ran amok and caused a civil disturbance, as well as unexplained deaths, and several gnomish farmers have been taken into custody pending charges. So in no particular order, we have the yellow musk giant space hamster. These yellow-furred giant space hamsters have a revolting odour, even at the best of times. Plus, when agitated, they can release a 30-foot cloud of noxious gas that requires a DC 13 Constitution saving throw from any caught inside it, or they will be blinded and poisoned until they can get out of the gas and make a saving throw at the start of their next turn. The rather wild giant space hamster may actually just be wild space hamsters that have been captured and added to a domestic farming stock, but they are undeniably difficult to deal with and probably prone to biting at the slightest provocation. The great horned giant space hamster, growth of a large rhino-like horn at the front of the head, does give these beasts an exotic look, but unfortunately also provides a 1d12 piercing damage gore attack when they charge at a foe who attempts to invade their burrow, or occasionally gets too close to their food when they are within 30-foot charging distance. The abominable giant space hamster, an albino variety that thrives in cold climates and eats carnivorous trees. Essentially, it is just resistant to any cold damage and has a very thick pelt of fur, plus the ability to burrow through snow and ice. The ethereal giant space hamster is not actually ethereal at all. They are just spectacularly disturbing to look at, as the fur, skin, muscles and organs of these giant space hamsters is transparent and the bones can be clearly seen inside it. Other than an appearance that may frighten the unaware on first sight, they have exactly the same stats as any other regular giant space hamster. The fire-breathing, phased doppelganger giant space hamster, Whoever thought that this was a good idea should have all laboratory access revoked immediately. The FBPD-GSH, not only capable of phasing into the ethereal border plane exactly like a phase spider, they're also resistant to fire damage and capable of breathing a 30-foot cone of flame up to 3 times per day that requires a DC 13 dexterity saving throw to take half of the 2d8 fire damage inflicted on those who fail the save. The BPDGSH is also able to shape change into any mammal of roughly equal size, so a horse, a bear, a bull, a giant wombat, a young elephant seal, and so on. For the icing on the cake, they are intelligent creatures who delight in using their abilities to cause great mayhem. The invisible giant space hamster looks very much like a normal giant space hamster until suddenly it's not there for a few moments. They can turn invisible as an innate spell-like effect once per day for up to 1d4 plus 4 rounds, even remaining invisible when they attack or take damage if they make a successful concentration check. The carnivorous giant space hamster, a regrettable attempt at making a giant hamster that can fly. They did succeed in giving it bat wings and a flight speed of 40 feet per round. Unfortunately, they're also carnivorous, with a fang-filled maw able to deliver a 2d10 plus 4 bite, capable of severing limbs, which the beast will happily stuff into its cheek pouches. The armor-plated giant space hamster, looking more like a giant cross between a hamster and an armadillo, this critter is exactly the same in regards except it has an armor class of 16 and an additional 30 hit points. The saber-toothed giant space hamster has a nasty overbite that this hamster has got a ferocious bite attack of 2d8 bite piercing damage, but other than that they are still placid omnivorous critters who would rather run than fight. The sylvan, or jungle giant space hamster with longer limbs and toes, this sleek variety is able to climb trees, vines, and even cliff faces in order to browse on delicious fruits, berries, and nuts. The subterranean giant space hamster, with full 120-foot dark vision and the ability to tunnel through anything short of soft rock at a range of 25 feet per round. It also has larger claws that allow it to scratch opponents who get too close for 44 slashing damage each. The two-headed Lernaean bombardier giant space hamster, a rapidly healing creature that can stun nearby creatures by a loud sound of its belch. Contrary to the name, it can't regrow severed limbs or heads, though it heals 3 hit points per round. The belch forces all medium or smaller adjacent targets to make a DC 12 Constitution save or be poisoned, actually just mildly stunned, save on their turn to end the condition. Tyrannosaurus Rex, a much larger version of the giant space hamster, but extremely cowardly and prone to fleeing in panic from the slightest disturbance. They have a low armor class of 9 due to their gargantuan size, an additional 80 hit points, and a tendency to accidentally stomp on things that get in their way, requiring a DC 12 dexterity saving throw or taking 3d10 bludgeoning damage and being knocked prone, save to avoid all damage and effects. The Tyrannosaurus Rex can grow to 25 feet tall at the shoulder and consume enormous amounts of food, so they're always hungry, and the key to handling them is to luring them around with food. The giant space hamster of ill omen, is somewhat legendary, is the largest space hamster ever created, reportedly. A unique and somewhat legendary individual of colossal size named Willy Rupert. Also said to be highly intelligent, able to cast spells, and even operate a spell-jamming vessel. Gnomes will tell horror stories around campfires late in the evening of how Willy Rupert hates all gnomes for eating his kin, and one day will squash them all, one by one, beneath his mighty paws. The miniature giant space hamster, about the size of an ordinary hamster, usually kept as pets. A prime example in the Forgotten Realms is the infamous Boo, pet of the ranger named Minsk in Baldur's Gate. You can buy miniature giant space hamsters from a shop called Prime Exotics in the city of Sigil for 1 gold coin. Also, there is one located in a specific location underneath Waterdeep in the dungeon called Undermountain. The miniature giant space hamsters are fairly intelligent. They may actually talk to those they trust. Otherwise, they just emit hamster squeaks. Now I will hand you back over to Dungeon Dad as he delves into the giant space hamsters and how to use them in your game.
Well, thank you so much, AJ, for that extraordinary deep dive into the giant space hamster lore. And completely insane variants aside, typical giant space hamsters, much like their earthbound equivalents, aren't exactly vicious. That said though, if you back them into a corner, like AJ said, you are absolutely still contending with a beast the size of a grizzly bear. And as always, I have created a 5th edition stat block conversion for the base monster, a link to which can be found in the description below. So feel free to follow along as we talk about this thing's abilities, or just take a look after the fact if once we go over everything you decide you want to use the giant space hamster in your game. Now first off, what should come as no surprise is that these guys have a keen sense of smell. They'll have absolutely no difficulty seeking you out, especially if you have any type of food on your person, so sneaking up on them can be really difficult. If stealth is your goal, make sure you go hamster hunting before breakfast. I mean, I guess if you're hunting for a giant space hamster, you probably haven't eaten in a while anyways, but that's beside the point. Should combat actually break out and the giant beastie becomes forced to defend itself, it's going to do so with the limited options at its disposal. Two claws, which don't pose much of a threat aside from their tremendous size, are going to be coming at anyone seeking a fight. And if that's not enough to get the job done, the hamster has one unique trick up its sleeves, or in its cheeks apparently. Behind those two massive front teeth are a pair of cheek pouches, usually reserved for storing and carrying food back to the nest. However, in a brawl, these peculiar pouches can be used to store enemies and prevent them from causing trouble. See, the hamster has a pretty nasty bite attack, and if it hits the target, that target has to make a dexterity save, or they will become engulfed and restrained by the massive rodent. And once an unfortunate adventurer has been pulled into the dreaded cheek pouch, the only way out is brute strength. A strength save is going to be your ticket back to the outside of the beast, albeit covered in hamster saliva. Now, while this may not be the most deadly creature your party is liable to go up against, it certainly could be one of the most memorable. So maybe next time, instead of a horse, your party encounters fierce barbarian warriors riding atop giant space hamster steeds. Though not as fast, in battle they are much more resilient and very capable. But all that said, this hasn't even touched on the many variants among the species. So with some clever or not so clever DM bioengineering, you can make the space hamster of your dreams a reality. AJ has already covered the numerous official space hamster variants, all of which are extremely simple to create for yourself. You simply just have to take the stat block of the base creature and add on whichever abilities you like. And maybe none of the pre-existing variants strike your fancy? That's okay. Simply find a creature in your favorite monster manual with a cool ability you like and tack it on. Shadow hamsters that deal strength damage? Sure. Hamsters with a petrifying gaze? Why not? Space hamsters with lycanthropy? Were hamsters? Sounds dumb, but do it. Space hamsters infused with beholder DNA that have multiple eye stalks and shoot magic everywhere? I'm begging you not to, but I'm not saying it's impossible. This is one of those rare instances where you can just get crazy weird with a monster and your players will likely just accept it. Plus, going down this route has some potential for some awesome old school sci-fi plot lines. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Just one thing you need to keep in mind whenever you're adding on these extra abilities is the only thing that's really going to change from the base creature is its challenge rating. So if you do go the mad scientist route with the giant space hamster, just be sure to give your party the appropriate amount of experience points when they finally defeat your Frankenstein creation. And I'm sure you're already thinking of many ways you could employ this fearsome foe, so let's explore some of those ideas and take a look at some plot hooks. So as I mentioned, the giant space hamster can be employed by the enemies of your party as mounts to give them an edge in mounted combat. However, this will of course open up a door for your players to potentially use the giant space hamsters as transportation of their own. And while it may not be a great fit for those of you running campaigns on the grim dark side of things, the idea of a noble paladin atop a gallant hamster steed warms my DM bones. As per the lore, they are originally experiments which sometimes can get out of hand and end up becoming quite populous. So perhaps your party is tasked with the job of controlling that population. A gnomish scientist responsible for the creature's escape from captivity could be willing to pay handsomely for aid in returning whatever specimens the party can, and of course eliminating those they can't. Alternatively, perhaps among the giant space hamsters is one of the miniature variety with a much higher intelligence score. This individual could be the mastermind that orchestrated the breakout in the first place. The party could choose to side with the poor, innocent giant space hamsters and lead a hamster army of destruction to take down the gnomes seeking to destroy their once test subjects. They might not get paid in that case, but some of the hamsters could stick around and serve as mounts after the fact. And who knows what that miniature space hamster could accomplish if left alone? What are the biological ramifications of letting the hamsters run wild? Hard to say, but that would also give you some room to play with as a dungeon master. Or perhaps on a different giant space hamster farm, some very dangerous experimental test hamster gets loose and the party has to track it down and bring it back alive. They haven't been told what, but apparently it would be very bad if the subject were to die in the wild. This could be because of horrible biological effects its corpse might have on the world, or maybe the gnome who hired a party simply doesn't want his secret experiment to fall into a rival's hands. A rival who could come to the party with an enticing offer of their own if they bring the subject to her instead. There's a pretty giant space to explore here with these creatures, and most of your storylines, if you're choosing to not just use them as a random encounter, are likely to involve experimentation on some level. But in any case, I think there is a lot of room for creativity, and you can play these beasties off as totally goofy giant rodents or as massive monsters meant to play a part in an actual living and breathing ecosystem. And whether they're meant to serve your game as a threat or simply a fuzzy friend, that is completely up to you. So thank you so much for having me on the channel today to talk about these critters. Diving into the giant space hamster lore and their history was a ton of fun, and as always, be sure to DM responsibly.
If you liked the lore in these videos, don't forget to check out videos by fellow Forgotten Realms lore masters, just like Dungeon Dad. Check out my channels tab where I have a list of them for you to explore. Please hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you like what I do and what Dungeon Dad does. Check out my Patreon for some exclusive content and for all the full scripts from these videos. Buy some merchandise from Teespring. Wear your geek with pride. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon. And if you did enjoy this collab between two D&D lore channels, please let us know. Definitely go out and check the other companion video to this one, which is on Dungeon Dad's channel on the Stellar Dragon. Also, for those of you who have more desire for Spelljammer content, please let me know. I'm getting more and more resources, and I've got more and more interest in Spelljammer and more of a drive to get Spelljammer back into 5th edition as the days go by in 2020. So if you feel the same way, let me know in the comment section down below.